Happy Monday, everybody. Happy Monday. I love Mondays. I'm not sure why. Weekend's over, and God, my liver needed a break because it was a heck of a time for me. Went out, had some fun, watched a lot of football. I watched a ton of football. We got a huge show for you today. We are going to talk football. We're going to talk a little bit of NBA because the NBA is coming up just around the corner. We're like hours away from the season starting. We're going to talk about the New York Jets. The Jets won a football game. Can you believe that? We're going to play a little something called Who Would You Rather Play? We've got Michael Schussler coming in for his almost year-end fantasy awards. Lance Fernandez will join us with NBA predictions because, like I said, hours away from the NBA season starting. Then we're going to play a game called the Guess Who game. We called it that because, you can guess. And then we're going to dip into the mailbag where we're going to answer questions from everybody out there. My name is John Todora, and you are listening and maybe watching the What's on Sports podcast. We are broadcasting to you live via Facebook, via YouTube, and of course, most of you are listening. We have a huge listening base on our podcast platforms. You can download us anywhere you want to. Just look for What's on Sports. So before we go any further, I do want to let you know that our show is sponsored by our friends over at Sports Trading Systems. For those of you that like to trade sports, like you trade stocks, or if you've never even heard about this concept and you'd love to learn, go over to sportstradingsystems.com. Look around. You can peruse, as we like to say. You can look around throughout the site, check out what's going on over there. It's a great website with lots of cool stuff. They are our sponsor for our video today. You are invited to go over and participate over there today if you'd like to. Now, before we go any further, I want to talk to you about something that has only happened 5 times in history. Only 5 times in history has a 17-point underdog, 17 points or more, actually won in the NFL. So when you see a team that's 16, 17, 18 points, you're basically looking at a team that has no chance. Usually those odds will end up being somewhere around 8, 8.5 to 1. So if you bet $1 and the team wins, you can win $8.50. So, and the reason these odds are so high is because these teams are usually so bad and so mismatched in the actual matchup. So over the weekend, the New York Jets, who were winless, and you can tell there's a past tense there, the New York Jets were winless, played against the Los Angeles Rams, who have been just really on fire lately. Their defense has been great. Their offense has been clicking. They've found a running game with Cam Akers. And, the Jets were pretty much, everyone's looking at the schedule. Rest of the schedule is not a cakewalk. Not that it could be for an 0-13 team at this point, or 0-12 team. And everyone's thinking the Jets are going to lose. Now, I'm going to tell you something. And for those of you that have followed along with what I do and what I do here on the podcast and the things we talk about, I will tell you that just like the Steelers, I had isolated 2 or 3 games the Steelers could lose. And I'd really isolated all the way down to the game the Steelers would lose. I knew the Steelers would lose at Washington. And I told anybody that would listen to me, bet Washington against the Steelers. And as a Steeler fan, it was painful. But as a true gambler and somebody who understands the analytics and understands that in order to make money in this industry of gambling, you've got to be able to understand that you're going to take some losses and you're going to take some wins and be able to find the bubbles that you can play your money in. You're always looking for that little anomaly inside the matrix, So we found it with the Steelers. We were able to isolate it, and we were able to isolate it as well with the Jets. And here's what we did. We found a 3-game patch where we thought that the Jets could win. And I told anybody that would listen to, make your play inside these 3 games. Now, we only got 2 games into the window. And on the second game, if you would have paid $1 on the Jets, you would have won $8.50. So you would have put $2, because we would have lost last week, and $1 this week. And you would have put $2 in to make $8.50. That, my friends, is what we call smart gambling. Now, let's not talk about gambling. Let's talk about the actual Jets, because the media is losing their mind. The mainstream media can't seem to wrap their head around the fact that these are competitive players. The mainstream media can't seem to wrap their head around the fact that even though Adam Gase is going bye-bye and will probably most likely never coach again in the NFL, at least in the head coaching position, and I can't imagine he would get a coordinator's job after this, but, I could be wrong. Stranger things have happened. The Jets, Adam Gase, his entire coaching staff, the entire organization was just going to lay down for the rest of the year and take the L. Well, that did not happen, folks. It didn't happen at all. And if you watch that game, as bad as the Rams looked, and they didn't look good, I'm not going to lie to you, they didn't look good. The Jets didn't look bad either. And those guys, when the cameras would zoom in on those Jets players, they were focused, they were determined. Those are grown men out there that are professional athletes being paid to do a job. They could have just cashed it in and said, you know what? Forget about it. We're done. Next year we'll have a new coach. Maybe I won't even be here. That team played their heart out, and they won, and they beat the Jets fair and square. There was no controversy in that game that I could see. I watched it peripherally. I'm not going to lie. It was on the second TV. I have 3 TVs in my living room. I have one huge screen, and then I have 2 70-inchers on each side of it. I've got this laser projector thing that's actually really awesome. It shows like this huge movie screen, and then I've got 2 70-inch TVs on each side of it. And that's how I watch football. And I had the Jets on one of the TVs because I just knew it. I just knew it. I told everybody it was inside the window, and wouldn't you know, I was right. Congratulations to the New York Jets. Congratulations to the New York Jets fans. I understand it's been a terrible season. Again, I am a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I've never had to deal with that, and hopefully never will. But for those of you that have had to deal with it and have had to go through it, what has to be awful to sit every Sunday and just know you're going to lose. Congratulations to you. You guys finally won a game. Trevor Lawrence just got a little further away from you. Now that's the bad part. And the bad part for Trevor Lawrence is he really had a choice between the Jets, which is an abysmal franchise, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is maybe a worse franchise. I'm not sure. Now, the Jacksonville's had more success recently, but nobody seems to want to stay there. So something's wrong inside Jacksonville. The Jets have been awful, but very few people, aside from Jamal Adams, want to leave. So at least openly want to leave. So it's a little bit of a twist there. But again, congratulations to the New York Jets. You guys are winners, even if it's only for 1 week. Now, got a little something we're going to do today. We're always getting emails. Our website's at whatsonsports.com. Of course, you're invited to go over and watch all the videos, look at all the great content over there. We've got some amazing writers putting out some really good content all the time. And what we're also doing over there is we're trying to become a very interactive sports sites. So we're looking for your comments. We have a mailbag so you guys can send in your questions. And what we did this week is we do have a mailbag coming up later on. I'm going to answer some questions. We had so much mailbag that we decided to break this into two different segments. And this segment is called Who Would You Rather Play? Now we're going to talk about some teams that are going to be coming up in the NFL playoffs. Some of these teams are already in the playoffs. At least they appear to be in the playoffs. Some of these teams are on the fringe, and there are comparisons. And we're going to say, who would you rather play? If you guys want to leave some comments in the comment section, you could do it because I'd love to know who you would rather play. Now, the only difference about this game, the one thing you have to take into account is like, who am I? So I'm just going to represent Team A. We're not going to say who I am, but who would I rather play? Let's start right here. So who would I rather play, the Browns or the Titans? Well, this actually might be the hardest one to pick. Both of these teams are playing really, really well. Both of these teams are ground and pound teams. They can control the clock. Both of these teams have stud running backs. I mean, you got Chubb against Derrick Henry. I mean, both playing really well. You have 2 good quarterbacks that are playing really well. They're both really loaded with a lot of talented players. Even though Cleveland lost OBJ, they're actually playing better without this quote-unquote superstar wide receiver. Both defenses are a little suspect in certain areas. If you're going to ask me who I'd rather play the Titans. Now I know that's a little out there, but I would rather play Titans for this reason. If you can stop Derrick Henry, and that's a huge if, but if you can stop Derrick Henry, you can stop the Titans. The Browns. I was a huge Baker Mayfield fan coming out of college, and I still remain that way. I think Baker Mayfield is a very, very good quarterback. He is becoming even better as the season goes on. The conversation we had about Baker Mayfield in weeks 1 through 6 is completely different from the conversation we've had about Baker Mayfield in weeks 7 through 12. Baker Mayfield is becoming quite a studly player. I would not want to play the Browns in the playoffs. Let's talk about it now. The football team versus the Rams. Well, after yesterday, after losing to the hapless, hopeless New York Jets, I would have to say the football team. The Washington football team has proved along the way, while they started as a miserable team. I say this all the time. It's not about what you did. It's about who you are as you enter the playoffs. And the Washington football team is entering the playoffs as a scary team. That's a defense that's very, very tough. And defense will win at this time of the year. So if you're asking me who I'd rather play, I'd much rather play the Rams right now. Who would I rather play? The Dolphins or the Colts? Another good one. And I got to be honest about this one too. Defense is going to win this. The Colts defense was one of the best defenses in the NFL. Maybe they still are. I'm just not sold on Phillip Rivers. And that's really what this comes down to. Now, I'm really not sold on Tua either, but I'm much more sold on the Dolphins defense. That secondary is fantastic. And if they get a chance to play someone like the Steelers or the Chiefs or anybody else along the way, look out for the Dolphins. They're getting hot at the right time. I'd rather play the Colts. Who would I rather play, the Bucs or the Seahawks? I got to be honest. I'd rather see old man Brady out there. I'd rather see Brady and his assortment of weapons in the playoffs. And I don't think anybody's ever said that, but I'm saying it to you right now. I'd rather see Tom Brady than see Russell Wilson and that scary freak DK Metcalf out on the outside. I don't know who the heck's going to cover this guy. That is a team, if they start to run the ball, the defense is coming around. I would so much rather play the Bucs than play the Seahawks. Who would you rather? Ravens or Raiders? Well, I don't know if either one of these teams makes the playoffs, but I'll be honest with you. I'd much rather play the Raiders. The Raiders are a dysfunctional mess right now, and the Ravens are pretty darn scary the last two games. Now, take for granted they did play Jacksonville yesterday, and they should look scary against Jacksonville. But that's the kind of team the kind of game that you need. You needed to go against a tough Cleveland team and win in that dramatic fashion, then go into Jacksonville and absolutely crush somebody in order for you to feel like you're a good football team. And I got to tell you, right now, the Ravens are absolutely frightening to me. I would hate to play the Ravens in the playoffs. So give me the Raiders any day. Who would you rather play, Arizona or Chicago? Well, this is another one for me. Kyler Murray is literally one of the most electrifying players I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, I get it. He's 5'10". He looks minuscule in the pocket. He does some crazy things on occasion. He's scrambling around. The plays almost look like a backyard football. But I would so much rather play the Chicago Bears and Mitchell Trubisky than ever see that little kid running around trying to tear me apart. And DeAndre Hopkins, is there anything this guy can't catch? I'm telling you, if you're asking me who I'd rather play, I would rather play. I'd much rather play Chicago. So we got Wyatt saying the Browns. He'd rather play the Browns than the Titans. Wyatt, would you rather play the Browns or would you rather not play the Browns? I'm confused by this. And I've got Michael's popping in from outside, popping off. Michael says he'd rather not play the Raiders, of course, because Michael is a Ravens fan, right, Michael? So speaking of Michael Schussler's with us today, and Michael is one of the leading fantasy experts in America today. He has been on fire this year. So happy to have him over at What's on Sports. They call him the Charm City Cash Cow because, well, he makes you money, and he makes you a lot of it. We're going to bring Michael out today to talk about something very special. Michael today wants to talk about his fantasy awards. So Michael Schussler's in the house. Michael, how are you, buddy?
Hey, John, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, brother. It's so good to see you.
Yeah,
love the red shirt today. Very Christmassy.
Well, it is the winter solstice, which is why we're celebrating.
What that means.
The winter solstice is it's the winter holiday that we celebrate around the world for the shortest day of the year, which is December 21st. So it's a way to celebrate while everyone's depressed and sad because it's cold and dark. And it's actually a special one this year, because there's something called the Great Conjunction happening, which is where the two biggest planets in our solar system, which would be Jupiter and Saturn, are converging, at least from our perspective. And it looks like they are forming one giant planet. And it's actually what many people think the three wise men used in the biblical story to find the manger and Jesus. That was the North Star, not the North Star, but the Star of Bethlehem was Jupiter and Saturn converging. And actually, what's interesting is in 2020, this will be the smallest or the minimum space between the two planets from our perspective, which they call arc minutes, and it will be 6 arc minutes. So it's going to look pretty amazing tonight if anyone gets out there and is able to see the sky. But because it's the winter solstice, this is a sports podcast anyway, we are celebrating the fantasy.
Hang on. I gotta ask you a question. Have you ever like asked a question like sometimes you're like, oh hey, how you doing? And then you're like, why'd I ask that question? So that's what just happened. It's just really literally one of those moments where I'm like, oh, winter solstice, what is that? And then you actually explained it. So I'm so sorry that I did that to all the listeners out there. I'd like to apologize. You did a great job explaining though. Well, I should have never asked that question though. I'm very sorry. Let's talk about your fantasy awards. People watch this show and listen to this show and download this show because they want to know more about football, more about sports, and they really come on to really get into your fantasy awards. And by the way, I'm really looking forward to Wednesday, because Wednesday you're going to be on the show talking about your NBA fantasy choices coming up here for all those guys that are in NBA drafts and stuff like that. So it's super exciting about that. But today we're kind of wrapping up football, kind of wrapping up the football season, which is sad for me. But I'd love to hear your fantasy awards for the NFL this year.
It's sad for me too. And it's the
Depressing.
fantasy playoffs. Yeah, of course. But we move into actual NFL playoffs, which is some of the most exciting sports around in the world. So here are my fantasy awards, and these are the best players that I've chosen relative to their fantasy value or their ADP average draft position from the beginning of the season. So we will.
Okay, so hang on, for those people out there that don't follow. At the beginning of the year, they kind of tell us where people should be drafted. So you say ADP, average draft position. So somebody should have been drafted like a first round, or are you talking about the average draft position of where they were actually drafted?
So it's where they were actually drafted in drafts this year, and then that all gets compiled, through ESPN, Yahoo, Best Ball. There's all these different kind of draft things.
You're a stat machine. You get it from everywhere.
Exactly. So my QB award goes to Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, wow.
As you can see on the screen. Now, Aaron Rodgers, he has 3,828 passing yards. He's got 40 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. That's good for 332 fantasy points. And his average
league
draft,
MVP. Good for league MVP too.
Yeah, it's very close. His average draft position was 87.3. So that's an 8th round pick. Right.
Wow.
Now, Aaron Rodgers only has less total fantasy points than Patrick Mahomes, whose ADP was 14.3. That's a second round pick, an early second round pick. Aaron Rodgers also has 45 more total fantasy points than my boy Lamar Jackson, his ADP was 17.4. So that's another second round pick, but you're getting value with Aaron Rodgers that you would have loved to wait on a quarterback. And that's what they always say. Fantasy drafts, you can wait on quarterback. Another, honorable mention for this could have really been Josh Allen, who's having an amazing year. He's got 30 passing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, and his ADP was actually behind Aaron Rodgers. He was like 96. So could have waited for the 9th round to get Josh Allen, who's outproducing, Tom Brady, Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, all these other guys, Deshaun Watson, who were taken in the top end of drafts.
Michael, just so you know, I found that what you just said to be incredibly interesting, but somebody else in the chat room found something else you said to be incredibly interesting. Lovely wanted to thank you for the explanation on the winter solstice. So I was wrong. There was one person who actually cared about that. And totally my bad. But let's talk about your favorite running back. The running back that's going to get your Schussler award this year.
The running back that gets my fantasy award has got to be James Robinson, another guy that I've talked to you about a bunch of times. He was undrafted not only in the NFL draft, but in most fantasy drafts as well. His ADP comes in at 162. So most fantasy drafts only have 16 rounds. So he's either not drafted or drafted in the very last round as a complete flyer. And my gosh, this guy has just gone absolutely off this year. He's got over 1,000 rushing yards, 10 total touchdowns, 49 receptions.
Wow.
That's good for 250 fantasy points. He's absolutely
imagine if this guy played on a good team.
Well, he is the entire Jaguars organization right now. And they're really getting behind this kid, and it's a shame that he was injured yesterday against the Ravens. Hopefully he's okay, but he's out producing guys like Ezekiel Elliott, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I talked about was, supposed to be a first round draft pick, even Nick Chubb, Kenyon Drake. These are names, that were taken so much earlier, obviously. So that value with James Robinson has been, absolutely fantastic. He gets my running back award.
Let's move to the outside a little bit. I'd love to know about the wide receiver that you think has got the Schussler award this year.
Another rookie. It's got to be Justin Jefferson, who
I drafted this guy, by the way. I drafted this guy.
What position did you draft him at? Do you remember what round?
Oh God, I'm gonna be honest. He was maybe he had to be close to the 10th round. I mean, he was late. Like when I took him, people were making fun of me. Who's Justin Jefferson? He's like the seventh best rookie. I'm like, no, this guy's going to be a stud. Watch. He's filling in a great position for the Vikings. Vikings like to toss the ball around. They can throw the ball around because they can run the ball. I mean, it just seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Absolutely.
I'll be honest. I didn't think he would take off until mid-season. Thought it would take a minute for him to get into the lineup and prove. I was wrong about that, though. This kid was on fire right away.
But you were right to take him, and you took him a little bit earlier than most people because his ADP was 123. So that's about the 11th or 12th round. But Justin Jefferson is the 8th overall, scoring wide receiver in fantasy this year. He's got more fantasy points than Mike Evans, who was drafted in the 3rd round in most leagues, and even his teammate Adam Thielen, whose ADP was 31.8. So there's another, 3rd round pick that Justin Jefferson has been out producing as far as fantasy goes. He's made plenty of fantasy managers like you very happy, and another stud rookie is going to have a great career. Love Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, so that's actually 2 rookies on your list right now, right?
That's right. Now you can probably this will be the last position that I'm doing. It's tight end. You have to know who this is. I talk about
it's going to be Rob Gronkowski.
You wish.
Oh, no.
Nah, it's Travis Kelce. Like. Honestly, it's got to be, because now Travis Kelce is a 1st round pick, okay, in fantasy drafts. Yes, his ADP was actually 22, so he's about a 2nd round pick, late 2nd round pick. But still, Travis Kelce, he's got over 50 more fantasy points than the 2nd highest scoring tight end, which is Darren Waller. And get this, Travis Kelce has over 125 more fantasy points than the 3rd place tight end, Robert Tonyan. So. Yeah, I mean, Kelce, the advantage of having Travis Kelce in your tight end slot is immeasurable. And that's why when I brought up, the amount of playoff teams or amount of fantasy teams in the playoffs, 70% of them had guys like James Robinson and Travis Kelce, because that value just can't be found anywhere else.
So I play in a league. I play in a league that's like $1,000 league. I play in a couple different leagues, but one of them is over at FFPC. .com, and it's $1,000 league, and that league happens to be a league where tight ends, for whatever reason, only tight ends get 1.5 points per reception. Tight ends become incredibly valuable, and believe it or not, the guy who's got the best record of anybody happens to have Travis Kelce as his tight end. He crushes us every week because Kelce hasn't had days like Waller. Waller's had some better peak days. But Kelce's floor has been much better, and he's been very consistent throughout the year. Yeah, he's been very consistent. And even those 120-yard, 1 touchdown things, it's like, if you can do that almost every week, I mean, he's just been amazing. And where did you say his average draft position was?
Kelce's was 22. So that's late 2nd round, which is honestly, I mean, looking back, it's like, damn, I wish I would have grabbed Kelce in the early 2nd round if I could. You love to get those stud running backs early on, but I can't say it enough. The advantage of having Kelce in your tight end slot, getting all those points, all those targets. He's on the best offense in the league. He's the best tight end in the league, maybe the best pass catcher in the league beside Devontae Adams. You get to play him as a tight end. It's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, win-win. His name is Michael Schussler. They call him the Charm City Cash Cow, and he's the host of the Fantasy Fallout podcast, which you can see on our Facebook page every Tuesday and every Thursday. And also, Michael writes some really cool, to me, some really amazing articles over on whatsonsports.com. Michael, I'm going to bring you back in just a little bit. I'm going to send you back to the green room, and I'm going to bring you back for a game a little later on. But thanks so much for all that great content. That was awesome.
Of course.
God, man, every time the guy comes on, I feel like I feel a little bit smarter. Actually, sometimes I got to be honest. Sometimes I feel a little dumber because he'll say something and I'm like, that makes sense, and I should have done that. I'm not a fantasy guy. I'm more of a gambler. So, but every time he tells me something, throughout this year, and Michael helped me out a little bit, just casual conversations, really more than really just a one-on-one tutelage, but casual conversations of like, oh, I do this and I do this. I sort of paid attention to him a lot. I learned a lot from him. I won some decent money this year in fantasy. Let's see. We got some comments out there. What would Kelce be without Mahomes? Well, Lance, Lawrence, what would any of these players be without Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes is without a doubt the most electrifying quarterback probably in the NFL. I mean, he's got a tremendous amount of weapons. He takes advantage of them, and he really, really uses them really well. And that offense is good. It's very creative. We got one more comment from Lovely Glorioso, who's like Kelce with a heart. Aw, How sweet. How sweet. Apparently Lovely has a crush on Travis Kelce. All right. Anyway, he is dreamy, isn't he? Anyway, guys, we got a great show coming up here. We're going to do something fun right now. We usually talk a lot about football, but, the NBA is coming up. It's time to start talking about basketball, what's happening in the room. And today I'm going to bring on what I consider to be an NBA expert. That's right. An NBA expert is about to join us. He formerly was a writer for Fox Sports, but now he's with us over at whatsonsports.com. His name is Lance Fernandez. Lance is in the house. Lance, how are you, buddy?
Doing good, John. I also learned a lot about winter solstice with Michael's explanation. But this I can guarantee the Rockets might be experiencing some winter solstice with the James Harden drama.
Oh yeah, listen, I got to be honest. I don't know what happened there. I usually have a pretty good firm control of the show, but it just went off, and he was like, "We're talking about Jupiter and Mars." I thought he was going to break out a blunt and start smoking it. I have no idea what was going to happen there. I pulled it back though, Lance. I got to give myself a little pat on the back. I might not be a fantasy expert. I might not be the best host in the world, but it got away from me, and I pulled it right back. Great to have you on the show. You've already touched on James Harden a little bit, but let's talk about these things that you want to do. You want to make 5 NBA predictions today, talking about the NBA season, which is starting up in just a few hours. The NBA season is coming up. We're going to do 5 predictions. Let's start with number 1 on the screen. It already says it. You think you know who the MVP is, huh?
Yeah, I'm trying to, or I'm willing to bet money that LUKA Doncic will be the most valuable player of next season. Because first things first, Kristaps Porzingis will be out indefinitely. So that means that he will carry much of the load on offense for the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, he will have some help from his teammates, but he is undeniably the nucleus of the Dallas Mavericks offense and possibly the defense as well. So with that scenario, you can expect him to pad up his stats, to gain more of his numbers, not just in points, but also in rebounds and assists. And of course, voting MVP is not based on stats alone. As always, if you look historically, there's always a backstory to every MVP.
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook won MVP because he averaged a triple-double. Giannis won MVP because he was young and he's an international player. James Harden won because, well, he had a historically dominating season that year. And for
in the beard, he had the beard also.
We have to go back to Steve Nash early in the millennium because their offense with the Phoenix Suns was just exciting and dominating. And you couldn't give it to Shaquille O'Neal every year, even though the stats would tell you otherwise. So,
well, listen, with that argument, you're right. It's far more impressive to see somebody like a Steve Nash, who's 6'2", 6'1", white. Doesn't look very fast. Doesn't look like an athlete really when you look at Steve Nash. And you see giant Shaquille O'Neal, 7'4", or 7'3", or however big Shaquille was. Almost 300 pounds. Of course, he looks like the best player in the NBA. That's why Steve Nash wins, though. Steve Nash wins because he doesn't look the part. He just looks like almost like a surfer guy. So LUKA looks like a basketball player, though. So what is LUKA's thing?
Well, number one, NBA is always playing towards the international audience. They always want to capture that international crowd because they are in turmoil here in the United States, and they would like to get a lot of attention internationally, especially with what happened during the live streaming of the NBA games during the bubble. They gained significant increases in audience, maybe because of the viewership times have changed, more favorable to countries outside the United States. But they would like to bank on that momentum. And having an international MVP in LUKA Doncic will give them rapid strides internationally. And not to mention, of course, if Lovely Glorioso loves Kelsey so much, who wouldn't fall for LUKA Doncic with that kind of boy band looks?
That is true. LUKA's a good-looking guy. He looks the part. And I think most importantly for LUKA, he's going to have the ball in his hand all the time. And if you want to win MVP, you got to get the ball in your hand. And if you want to be the guy, you got to make sure you get a lot of touches. So I think LUKA's going to have the ball in his hand a lot. Let's talk about your next prediction, though, Lance. This one really, really got me pretty interested. Tell me about this James Harden thing.
Okay, so as we have learned, James Harden was essentially the king of the Houston Rockets franchise for the better part of the decade. He was the one who was doing the travel schedule. He was the one in charge of the film schedule. He was the one in charge of everything, even personnel decision with the Rockets. So with that much control, and now you are installing a new management with Stephen Silas and a new general manager that is trying to hold back some of the power that was already given to him, I guess they would have a hard time dealing with James Harden now than before, because someone who has given much power might struggle if some of those leisures, some of those privileges are taken back. And let's face it, James Harden did have a lot of power in Houston. He did bring them to 8 straight playoff seasons. But when it comes to titles, he hasn't shown anything. He has nothing to show for. LeBron James does have some privileges with the Lakers, but at least he has titles to show for, unlike James Harden. So as the season goes by, I guess this drama, much like the winter solstice, will become darker and darker and darker. There will be longer nights. And I guess that eventually the Houston management will snap up and will eventually give in to James Harden's request. Hey, bring me to Brooklyn. And of course, the price would have to be steep. So they are getting good players, Dinwiddie, Kyrie LeVert, Jarrett Allen, who can be building blocks for a new playoff team in Houston. And of course, they wouldn't settle for that. They would rather have more draft picks aside from these 3 players from Brooklyn.
Yeah, to me, the NBA is broken. It's just a broken system right now because the players have been given so much power. And when you look at somebody like a James Harden, I mean, listen, I'm certainly not criticizing James Harden for his ability to score a basketball. I mean, the guy's probably one of the best NBA pure scorers in the history of the game. I can't play defense for a lick and doesn't really try. But the guy can definitely score the basketball. I mean, he is a shooter beyond shooters. But you're right. You bring up a great point. You give a guy like that all this power, and what has he really done for the game? He can score the basketball. That's fine. But what has he really done for the game? What has he really done for the team? Have they won any NBA championships? Have they won any? Have they gone to the finals at all? I mean, this is not a team that you look at every year and say, wow, they're going to be the team that's going to be the one to beat. You look at them and say they're going to go to the playoffs and they're going to fail. And when you give somebody like that power, I think you stay in that circle. It's a bad relationship. Maybe it's time for them to break up. Let's talk about your next prediction for the upcoming NBA season. You're talking about Michael Porter here.
Yeah. So there has been a lot of consideration on who will be the most improved player for next season. I also considered OG Anunoby of the Toronto Raptors, given that Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol are already out of the roster. So that would give him more playing time and a larger responsibility to the general scheme of things for the Toronto Raptors. But that said, I guess that it will still be Michael Porter Jr. who will win most improved player. He has to step up now because his honeymoon period in Denver is over. He has been injured, yes, but he has shown some glimpses of greatness during the bubble for the Nuggets. And now that he might step up to a starter role with the likes of Gary Harris and Jamal Murray, he has to contribute in a larger scheme of things. He has what it takes to become a versatile player. He has a knockdown shot from the perimeter. He can score at will. He can create offense for his own. And it's just a matter of time that he will put his game all together and become the most improved player for the season.
I think it's about consistency for a guy like Porter, but I will say I like that Denver Nuggets team. I think it's a very interesting team. They've got some very interesting pieces. And I'm actually excited to see if they can kind of put it together and make a little noise out there in the West. Let's talk about your next prediction here. Wow. That one popped up on the screen and got me a little bit. I think we jumped ahead one, but you're talking about the Lakers here?
Okay, so let's jump into the Lakers. Everybody did adjustments for their squad. Everybody made roster adjustments. For all we know, even the lowly Atlanta Hawks can make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference with Bogdanovic and Gallinari in the fold. And of course, they have Rajon Rondo who can provide stability off the bench. Or if Trae Young sucks up and doesn't play to his standards, there's always a Rondo as an insurance policy. But that being said, I guess the Lakers will still win back-to-back titles. They did make some improvements as well with their roster. They have a Montrezl Harrell who is a spark off the bench. They essentially retained everybody. And they now have an Anthony Davis who is more confident after winning a title. LeBron is still a force. Let's face it. After 18 years in the NBA, he's still an unstoppable and versatile force. Yep. And you combine that with a more confident Anthony Davis, a confident sixth man in Montrezl Harrell, and an offensive-minded point guard in Dennis Schroeder, who can also light up the scoreboard. then all indications will lead to the Lakers winning back-to-back titles.
Yeah, look, it's hard to argue. I mean, to me, LeBron James is probably the most unstoppable force in the NBA. And when you look at that team, Anthony Davis is actually better than him, which is, to me, scary as hell. Lakers got the best chance to repeat. Let's talk about your very, very last prediction. You're talking about sixth man of the year here. Tell me something, Lance.
Okay, so sixth man of the year. I would give my vote to Jordan Clarkson of the Utah Jazz. He had a strong preseason with the Utah Jazz. And looking at the roster of Utah, he will definitely be the first person off the bench for Quinn Snyder, barring any turning back the clock from Derek Favors, which I'm betting against. He has been solid in the preseason. He will be the spark off the bench for the Utah Jazz. And he will be given more minutes because Mike Conley's situation or status is still up in the air. We don't know yet if we're getting the Mike Conley of old or the old Mike Conley. So if that happens, you would need to give more playing time to Jordan Clarkson to somehow be the point guard of the Utah Jazz, but more importantly, to bring more offense from the bench of the Jazz.
I got to be honest. No one knows, no one loves the NBA quite like Lance Fernandez. He's one of our head writers over at whatsonsports.com. Lance, I want to thank you so much. You know, you're another one of those guys that every time you come on here and you start talking about basketball, I'm a basketball fan. I've been a basketball fan for a long time. Gone to a ton of games. When I lived in Miami, I went to a ton of Heat games. But no one seems to know basketball like you do. Like, you really study the game. I got to appreciate that about you. Lance Fernandez in the house. Now, Lance, listen, I'm actually going to keep you around. But I'm just going to shove you back into the green room for just a second here and bring you back out. Well, I talked to our friends out there really quick, and I want to thank everybody for listening today. It's always great to have so many listeners. We've got a couple hundred people, looks like, watching us on some different social media platforms right now. And of course, at the end of the day, this show will be downloaded by thousands and thousands of people on all of their favorite podcast networks. So if you found us somehow, I'd like to thank you guys so much for listening to the What's on Sports podcast. I remind you all the time that we do have a website. I don't want to talk about it too much. I just invite you to go over and look at it. It's whatsonsports.com. You'll find some great content over there. You can set an alert so that you can get all of our notifications. Every time there's a new piece of content that pops up, you can get it sent directly to your desktop so you always know when something new is going on. I also want to remind you that we do have a sponsor. And our sponsor today is Sports Trading Systems. We invite you at any time throughout the show or after the show to go over to sportstradingsystems.com and learn how you, that's right, you can break the chains of these bookmakers and your DraftKings and your people like that, your FanDuels that are taking your money every week. Guys, go over to sportstradingsystems.com and learn how to not gamble anymore, but to learn how to use sports trading lines just like other people trade stocks. You guys can go over there right now, sportstradingsystems.com, learn how to do what they do over there. Trust me when I tell you, it'll be well worth the trip. Now, I'm going to bring a couple guys back on. Some of you know these guys. These guys were already on the show earlier today, but we're bringing them back on because we're going to play a little game, and I love games like this. We're going to play a little game. Michael Schussler has put together a game for us, and I called it something different. Now, what I called it was the Guess Who game, and that's what ended up on our title slide. For the people that are listening out in the audience, I want to throw comments out there and want to try to guess some of these answers. You can do it. But Michael has put together 3 or 4 questions. I don't know how many. 3 or 4 questions of some really interesting things that are going on. This is NFL based, Michael?
Yes, it is. 3 NFL.
Okay, so it's NFL based questions. And Michael's going to shoot the questions at us because Michael's got all these crazy statistics and everything like that. He's like that guy. And Lance and I are going to try to see if we can figure out what the answers are. Now, Lance, the only thing I'm going to ask you is I want you to remember that it's my show and I don't want you to make me look bad. So please don't embarrass me in any way by answering all these questions. Give me a chance at least to answer one. I know you're one of those sports nerds as well. So, and for you, those of you in the comments, again, let me answer the questions first. Just give me a shot. I'm an old guy. Give me a shot here. Michael, go ahead. Fire away.
All right. First of our Guess Who questions. Which NFL team
buzzer
has as many punts as touchdown passes this season?
Oh, I actually know this one. I'm going to give Lance a chance first because I know the answer to this one.
Again,
I'd have to say the Green Bay Packers.
Boom.
That is correct.
That is correct. That is correct. I knew that. And no one answered in the chat yet. I knew the answer already.
40
I should have wrote it
punts,
down so you'd believe me.
40 punts to 40 Aaron Rodgers touchdown passes. An incredible ratio.
Absolutely incredible.
Just adding to his, argument for the MVP, which is getting harder and harder to deny.
Yeah, just growing his legend by the day, Aaron Rodgers.
That's right.
And again, guys, just because I like to keep reminding you of the things that I told you about. We had a debate a few weeks ago on this show talking. The three of us actually had the debate over who was going to win MVP, and I believe that I chose Aaron Rodgers. Just saying it out loud again so that it's out there. I like to get my predictions out in front. Now you may embarrass me with the rest of your questions that I don't know the answers to.
All right, fair enough. Well, you didn't know what the winter solstice was, so best of luck.
I don't know everything. I don't know everything. The things I know, I know. The things I don't know, Like you start talking about winter solstice, and I was like, I knew a girl named Dana Soltis.
There you go.
That's where my mind goes. But go ahead, continue.
All right. This is a very interesting question here. How many starting running backs, and we will be defined as season opener starting running backs on the depth chart, how many of those starters, of those 32, have not missed a single game this year?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a difficult question.
And can you name bonus points if you can name them? Anyone out there in the chat, if you want to start throwing some names out there, I'll read.
Travis Henry.
Who?
Travis Henry.
Who is that?
Who is Travis Henry?
Yeah,
Travis Henry.
Oh wait, his name used to be Travis Henry. It's I just blanked out on Henry's first name. Derrick Henry. Sorry, I always call him Travis Henry. Travis Henry used to be a running back for the Tennessee Titans.
Fair.
Derrick Henry. My bad.
They were the Oilers back then, John.
No, they weren't the Oilers. They were still the Tennessee Titans. Jesus Christ, how old do you think I am? Don't answer that question. Anyway, I'm going to go with Derrick Henry was one, right?
Yes, that is one.
Running backs that didn't miss a game.
Maybe if you can get the question was how many. You don't even have to name them. Naming them is for bonus points. But how many starting running backs?
I always want bonus points.
Defined as running backs who started the depth chart at number 1 in the running back position.
6.
6 is close, but is not correct.
Pretty sure it was 6. Lance, you want to take a shot at this? Don't say 6. It's wrong.
Yeah, it's not 6, Lance.
I guess it's still less than 10. So I would have to say 9.
No, it's less than 6.
It's less than 6. I knew it was less than 6.
Okay.
Less than 6. So I get the next guess. I'm going to say the guess is 5.
It is 5. And
bang.
So we have that is 5. You've already
championship.
Named 1. You've already named 1.
I've already named 1.
Someone in the chat just named number 2.
Someone in the chat named number 2.
It is James Robinson.
I was going to say James Robinson. Darn it.
Steve's good at these. He's always
darn it. All right.
That is 2. There's 3 left.
There's 3 left. 3 left. I'm going to go with the running back for the and I don't know. I don't actually know this one. Lance, you want to take a shot?
I'll give you a hint. One of them is
I'll
obvious.
take it.
This is a superstar running back, absolute beast. First round fantasy pick. One of them is obvious, and then the other 2 are a bit surprising.
Hang on. So we got a guess here. I know this one's wrong. Someone's saying Kamara.
That is correct. That is the obvious.
Kamara hasn't missed a game.
Yeah. Hasn't missed a game.
He has not missed a
Really?
game. Nope.
Okay. Here's another guess.
5.
5.
5. Yeah. About 5 minutes after we said that the number was 5. See what you're doing.
She's a little late. All
right. So there's 2 players left. No, these are both surprising. One of them is a legend. I'll give you that.
One of them is a legend.
Yeah, maybe the best.
So he's a starting running back who hasn't missed a start.
Correct.
Adrian Peterson.
Very good. Adrian Peterson is number 4. Now this one you might not even get because this guy he's frustrating. Put it that way for fantasy managers. He doesn't really produce a lot, but he was the number 1 running back coming into the season. He still is for his team.
Doesn't produce a lot. Was number 1 running back coming in.
AFC
Still is.
AFC East.
In the AFC East.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Singletary for Buffalo.
Devin Singletary.
Devin Singletary. Yep.
Oh yeah.
All right, good
Yeah,
job.
they got a terrible running game there. Boom, man! I got major extra fantasy points here.
Yeah, you're on fire today, John.
Thank you, Lance. Lance, when you come on here and you pump up my ego like this, it's amazing. It's amazing. All right, so that was only the second question, right?
Yep. So here's my last question that I
last question.
Jerry Rice holds the NFL record for the most seasons with a receiving touchdown at 20. Who has the second most?
Second most seasons. I'm going to say
this is an active player.
He's an active player?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then I was wrong with my guess.
I would have to say Larry Fitzgerald.
That is right, Lance. Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh, damn it, Lance.
Got it. Yeah.
Damn it, Lance. Good call. Wow.
Yep, you just have to remember all of the OGs in the NFL right now, and there's not too much older than that.
No, that was fast, though.
Larry caught his first touchdown of the season yesterday. And yeah, that's now 17 seasons in a row, or all of his active seasons that he has called a touchdown pass. So,
oh, wow. Wow, awesome.
Yep.
Hey, man, I love these games. It looks like the people in the chat do, too. We'll have to continue playing them. For those of you listening on podcasts that weren't able to actually tell us the answers, I'm sure you were thinking of them and having fun with it. Michael Schussler comes out again and stumps most people, not me, but stumps most people with his trivia. Lance, good job. Thanks for being on the show. Michael, great job, man. I love when you do these segments, man. They really make me happy. Guys, thank you both for coming on the show today. Guys, we're going to wrap up the show. We have one last part of the show that we're going to do. And then actually, if you guys want to throw some questions out at the end, I'm glad to answer them. We have one thing that we do. We call the mailbag. We invite people on our website to send in their questions, and we're more than happy to answer these questions for people. So what we're going to do is we're going to throw out the mailbag, and we're going to be answering the questions that came in this week. Now, in full disclosure, I have not I've not read any of these questions, and no one's read them to me. So I don't know what these questions are. They're going to come out. I'll give you my first response. Once I see the questions, all I can see is 1, 2, and 3 on my screen. I'll click on them and see what happens. Here's the first question. After the win over the Saints, are you finally convinced that the Chiefs are possibly the greatest team of all time? No, I'm not. I'm not convinced at all, actually. And I know that I'm in the minority in this one. Everyone seems to be like so crazy about the Chiefs. Let me tell you something. If you watch that game at all, if you watch the Chiefs play the Saints, there were plenty of opportunities for the Saints there. They put out a crippled Drew Brees out there, who at one point I think was 7 for 24. It was not the Drew Brees of old. Michael Thomas didn't play. The Saints' best defensive player got thrown out for punching someone in the face, which is always stupid to me in football. The guy's wearing a helmet. What are you doing trying to punch somebody? It was just not a great performance by the Saints. The Saints lost that game. The Chiefs did not win that game. The Chiefs are incredibly vulnerable, and I keep telling people that. If they make it to the playoffs in this state, I mean, they're obviously going to the playoffs, but if they go there in this current condition that they're in, they are incredibly vulnerable to a team like Miami, to a team like the Titans, to a team like the Browns, to even a team like the Steelers, who have not been playing very well right now. The Chiefs are vulnerable. It's going to be a very, very tough road for them if they don't start to fix some of the mistakes that they're making. The Chiefs, to me, are a very good team, but they are not unbeatable, and they are not one of the greatest teams of all time. They won the Super Bowl last year. They got hot at the right time. They won the championship that they deserved. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Chiefs for who they are. What I'm saying is that everybody needs to cool their jets. There is no team right now that's unbeatable, obviously. Look at the records. There are no teams that are unbeatable. There are teams that are vulnerable. There are teams that have gotten away with a lot. Kansas City is lucky to have gotten away with the things that they've done. Pittsburgh is lucky to have gotten away with the things that they've done. The Packers are lucky to, even though they're efficient, are lucky to have gotten away with some of the things that they've done in order to win. The Packers almost lost to Jacksonville. So any given Sunday, a team can beat another team. No team is unbeatable. And no, I'm so sorry to tell you, the Kansas City Chiefs are not an unbeatable team. Each week, we answer all of your mailbag questions. Let's go to our next question right now, which is going to be, recently, Randy Moss made fans go crazy with his claim that he's the greatest wide receiver in NFL history. He said this on the new Terrell Owens podcast and put T.O. second on that list and Jerry Rice third or fourth. Who do you think is the GOAT? Well, first of all, let me tell you, I happened to stumble upon the Terrell Owens, I hope you got your popcorn ready, podcast the other day, and was shockingly surprised that this is a very good podcast. It's very good. I was really surprised. I did not think that T.O. could. Now, T.O. brought in a host that helps him. It was a very good show. He had on a couple guests. I've seen Sterling. No, I've seen Shannon Sharp on there, and then I saw the one with Randy Moss. To me, I've always said this, and I'll say two things about this topic, and we'll move on. First of all, I've always said this: Randy Moss is the greatest wide receiver I've ever seen in my whole life, and I'm old enough to have seen Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice was a very, very good receiver in a very, very different time. Jerry Rice was uncoverable at some points in a very, very different time. A totally different time. Now, Deion Sanders could shut him down, but there was never anybody that I can recall that could shut down Randy Moss. When Randy Moss wanted to play, when Randy Moss had something to prove, when Randy Moss wanted to be Randy Moss, he was the greatest wide receiver in our generation. And even Jerry Rice proved it because he recently responded to something online. I think he was on Instagram. He made a post that was his statistics against Randy Moss's statistics. Randy Moss only played 14 years. Jerry Rice played 21 years. The statistics were actually, if you bear it down year to year, were actually pretty close to each other. But here's the thing that Jerry Rice did wrong. Jerry Rice actually posted that and said, "You got mossed." Well, I don't know anybody that says you got Jerry Riced. I don't know anybody that says you got riced. No one says that. People do say you got mossed. Jerry and Randy Moss hasn't played football in almost 10 years. So I don't know. The greatest of all time? I also want to say this really quick. We use that term far too much, the GOAT. This guy's the GOAT, that guy's the GOAT, this guy's the GOAT. No. The greatest of all time means the greatest of all time. Patrick Mahomes is not the greatest of all time. He's a very good quarterback. In time, we'll see if he's the greatest of all time. But right now, you cannot say that he's the greatest of all time, along with Peyton Manning, along with Dan Marino, along with all these other guys who are also the greatest of all time. There's only one. There can only be one greatest of all time. We need to retire this GOAT thing and stop using it. We need to take the emoji out of our phone so people will stop putting it on people's Instagram pages and on Instagram posts saying that this guy's the GOAT. There can only be one GOAT. Randy Moss is the guy. All right, last question we're going to go with right now. After what is looking like a complete meltdown, do you think John Gruden gets fired this offseason? I do not think there's a chance in hell that John Gruden gets fired this offseason. John Gruden is really good friends with Mike Davis, who's the son of I got a straight cash homie comment here. Who's the son of Al Davis, very, very tight. They signed him to a 10-year deal. I'm sure there's an out there. I'm sure there's a way out where they don't have to pay him, but I don't think they're going to take it because the Raiders have taken steps forward. Now, this has been a very bad run that we're caught in the middle of for the Raiders, but they've taken steps forward. They've taken steps forward to become a better team. They're far better than they looked last year, and they do have the potential to be better even next year. Now, John Gruden, to me, is an above-average coach. He's not a great coach. There was a moment. He was a moment in time when he was a very, very good coach. But since he came back from the Monday Night Football booth where he was excellent, he's an okay coach. He's a mediocre coach. But he signed to a long-term deal. He is the personality and the engine that drives that franchise right now. They just moved to Las Vegas. They haven't even had a chance to sell a ticket yet because they built that $100 billion stadium and weren't able to use it because of COVID. John Gruden stays. He's part of the marketing machine. He gets at least one more year out there. If he can't turn it around and have a winning season, I think the conversation changes. But he's going to have at least one more year, unlike some of these other NFL coaches. All right. My name is John Todora, and I, of course, am your host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the What's on Sports podcast. You can listen to us live on Facebook and on YouTube. And, of course, you can download this show. You can download it, keep it in your pocket, and this little thing they call a mobile phone. Carry it around with you. Put the headphones in, like these fancy headphones like I got, which somebody made fun of. These are great headphones. I don't need your attitude about these. These headphones are awesome. A little wrinkly, a little wrapped up, but they look great. They sound great. Anyway, download us on your favorite podcast application and take us with you. If you want to leave us any comments, go over to whatsonsports.com. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on all of our platforms. Thank you so much. We're out of here.